I'll never forget the look on that police officer's face as he stood on my porch, squinting at the paper in his hand. "Mr. Thompson," he said, trying hard to sound professional, "I'm here about a violation of HOA landscaping codes and unauthorized exterior paint color." I took a slow sip of my coffee and leaned against the door frame, trying not to laugh. "That's cute," I said loudly enough for the whole street to hear. "I'm not even in the HOA." Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement across the street. There she was, Karen Mitchell, Willowbrook HOA president and self-proclaimed guardian of suburban order, standing in her perfectly edged yard. Even from 50 feet away, I could see her jaw tighten as her plan began to crumble. The officer glanced from me to her, then back down at his paperwork, clearly confused. "Sir, are you sure? The complaint lists your property, 427 Oak Ridge Drive, as part of the Willowbrook HOA. "Yeah, let me back up a bit. About 6 months, to be exact. My name's Dan Thompson. I'm a software developer who works from home. After years of apartment living, I finally saved enough to buy a place of my own. A charming 2-story house with a big yard, perfect for the vegetable garden I'd always dreamed of. The neighborhood looked great. Tree-lined streets, tidy lawns, friendly neighbors. Well, mostly friendly. Here's the key detail. My house sits just outside the official boundary of the Willowbrook HOA. I made absolutely sure of that before signing anything. My realtor showed me the property maps, the boundary documents, everything. I liked the area, loved the house, but I had zero interest in paying fees just so someone could dictate what color I painted my shutters. The previous owners gave me a heads up about Karen Mitchell, the HOA president who lived directly across the street. "She's particular," they said diplomatically. I met her on move-in day. I was unloading boxes when she strutted over, clipboard in hand and a smile so fake it could have been trademarked. "Welcome to Willowbrook," she chirped in a voice that could strip paint. "I'm Karen Mitchell, HOA president. I'll need you to fill out these membership forms and review our community standards." I set down my box, wiped my hands on my jeans, and gave her a polite smile. "Thanks for the welcome, but I'm not in the HOA. This property isn't part of Willowbrook." Her smile flickered like a dying light bulb. "Oh, but surely you'll want to join voluntarily. We maintain such high standards here." "I appreciate the offer," I said evenly, "but I'm good." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Her eyes narrowed, and she clutched her clipboard tighter. "I see," she said, her voice now sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, I do hope you'll maintain your property to our community standards anyway. We wouldn't want neighborhood values to decline." With that thinly veiled threat hanging in the air, she spun on her heel and marched back home. For the first month, things were quiet. I got settled in, set up my home office, and started planning my backyard projects. Then I committed my first cardinal sin in Karen's eyes. I planted a vegetable garden in my front yard. Not the whole yard, just a neat raised bed setup along the side of my driveway. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs, and a few sunflowers for good measure. It looked great, if I do say so myself. My immediate neighbors loved it. The elderly couple next door even asked for gardening tips. Karen, however, absolutely lost her mind. The first letter arrived 2 days after I finished planting. Official Willowbrook HOA letterhead, signed by President Karen Mitchell herself. "Dear homeowner, your recent landscaping modifications violate HOA Code Section 3.2 regarding approved plant varieties and garden placement. You have 7 days to remove the unauthorized garden or face fines of $50 per day." I laughed and filed it away. She had no authority over my property, and we both knew it. When I didn't respond, the letters escalated. The next one claimed I owed $350 in fines. The one after that threatened legal action. Each letter got more unhinged than the last. Suddenly, my garden hose was the wrong color, my trash cans were visible for 8 whole minutes on collection day, and my doormat was apparently aggressively non-neutral. Then came the real trigger. I painted my shutters. They'd been a dull beige when I moved in, so I gave them a deep forest green that looked perfect against the cream siding. I spent an entire weekend getting it right. My neighbor Tom even helped with the second-story windows. That's when Karen really decided to go to war. "Looks sharp," Tom said, stepping back to admire our handiwork. "Really makes the house pop." I agreed. The deep green shutters gave the place character, a perfect contrast to all the beige and gray boxes lining Willowbrook. Karen's reaction was immediate and exactly what I expected. This time, she didn't just send a letter. My security camera caught her standing in my driveway while I was out at the hardware store. Measuring tape in one hand, color swatches in the other, snapping photos like a crime scene investigator. The letter that arrived 2 days later was a true work of bureaucratic fiction. According to Karen, my shutter color, Forest Glen Green, violated multiple HOA codes that I was fairly certain she invented on the spot. Apparently, the approved color palette consisted exclusively of tasteful neutrals. Translation: beige, gray, and more beige. But letters weren't enough anymore. Karen decided to go full crusader. First came city code enforcement. A tired-looking inspector showed up one Tuesday morning, clipboard in hand. "We received a complaint about unpermitted modifications," he said apologetically. I showed him my paperwork for the garden beds and explained, again, that my property was an T in the HOA. He glanced around, sighed, and nodded. "Sorry to waste your time," he said. "We get these calls sometimes." Next came the solar panel incident. I'd installed a few panels on my south-facing roof to cut down on electricity costs, all properly permitted and up to code. The city inspector who showed up actually complimented the setup. "Nice system," he said. "Wish more people would go solar." Karen stood at her window watching him give me a thumbs up before driving away. I almost waved. Then came the police. Officer Martinez knocked on my door one Saturday morning, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Sir, we got a call about an illegal structure and possible drug activity." I nearly spit out my coffee. "Drug activity? It's a garden shed." He looked at the shed, then over at Karen's house. "Yeah, we figured. But we have to respond to calls. Mind if I take a quick look?" Inside, he found rakes, potting soil, and the most suspicious item of all, my lawnmower. He gave me an apologetic grin and left. That was the moment I decided enough was enough. I started documenting everything. Every letter went into a labeled folder. Every interaction was logged in a journal. I added more security cameras, front, back, and sides. I even filed Freedom of Information requests with the city and the police department to see just how deep Karen A.'s obsession went. What I found was jaw-dropping. Karen hadn't just filed complaints. She had fabricated authority. She told officials my property was part of the HOA and submitted fake documents claiming the boundaries had been expanded. She even forged what looked like meeting minutes showing the board had voted to fine me. It was no longer harassment. It was fraud. I took my growing stack of evidence to my friend Sarah, a lawyer. She flipped through the papers, her eyebrows climbing higher with every page. "Dan, this is harassment, filing false reports, and possibly criminal fraud," she said. "You need to shut this down. Hard." Together, we drafted a cease and desist letter. It spelled everything out in black and white. My property was not, and never had been, part of the Willowbrook HOA. Karen Mitchell had no authority over me. Any further contact or false reporting would result in immediate legal action. I started documenting everything. Every letter went into a labeled folder. Every interaction was logged in a journal. I added more security cameras, front, back, and sides. I even filed Freedom of Information requests with the city and the police department to see just how deep Karen S.'s obsession went. What I found was jaw-dropping. Karen hadn't just filed complaints, she had fabricated authority. She told officials my property was part of the HOA and submitted fake documents claiming the boundaries had been expanded. She even forged what looked like meeting minutes showing the board had voted to fine me. It was no longer harassment. It was fraud. I took my growing stack of evidence to my friend Sarah, a lawyer. She flipped through the papers, her eyebrows climbing higher with every page. "Dan, this is harassment, filing false reports, and possibly criminal fraud," she said. "You need to shut this down, hard." Together, we drafted a cease and desist letter. It spelled everything out in black and white. My property was not, and never had been, part of the Willowbrook HOA. Karen Mitchell had no authority over me. Any further contact or false reporting would result in immediate legal action. I sent it by certified mail and watched from my window as she signed for it. My camera caught every second. The moment her expression shifted from confusion to realization to pure, unfiltered rage, she crumpled the letter in her fist and stormed back inside. For 3 glorious days, there was silence. No letters, no inspectors, no nonsense. I dared to hope it was over. Then Karen made her biggest mistake. She called an emergency HOA board meeting, claiming she needed to expand enforcement to protect neighborhood values. But this time, not everyone was buying it. Tom, my next-door neighbor and a member of the board, filled me in later. "She tried to convince everyone you were destroying the community," he said. "But when we asked for proof, all she had were pictures of your garden and your shutters." When the board asked to see documentation showing my property was in the HOA, Karen stammered something about having already filed it with the management company. They called right there during the meeting. No record, no files, nothing. The room went dead quiet. One board member, Janet, a lawyer, asked the question everyone was thinking. "Karen, have you been acting on your own without board approval?" Silence. That's when I played my ace. On Sarah's advice, I showed up at the next HOA meeting as a guest, perfectly allowed under their own bylaws. I walked in with my folder full of evidence and calmly asked to address the board. Karen's face went through the entire color spectrum: red, white, red again. "He can't be here," she shrieked. "He's not a member." Janet turned toward her unamused. "Guests are permitted at open meetings," she said firmly. "I had 5 minutes to speak, and I planned to make every second count. I made every second of my 5 minutes count. First, I unfolded the county-stamped property boundary map, clear official proof that my house sat outside Willowbrook HOA's jurisdiction. Then I held up the cease and desist letter. Finally, I dropped the bomb, copies of Karen's false reports to city departments and police, complete with her signatures and fabricated documents. "I'm prepared to file charges for harassment and false reporting," I said evenly, "but I'd prefer to resolve this without involving law enforcement." The board members looked like they'd been doused in cold water. Janet, the lawyer, turned to Karen. "Karen," she said carefully, "have you been filing reports claiming HOA authority over Mr. Thompson's property?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on dry land. I was protecting our community standards," she stammered. "Someone has to maintain order." But the damage was done. The board immediately called for a vote of no confidence. The result, 6-1, with only Karen voting to keep herself in power. In less than 5 minutes, her reign was over, and it only got worse from there. The city had been quietly investigating the bogus complaints. They weren't pleased to discover how much time and taxpayer money she'd wasted. Karen received a formal warning for misuse of emergency services and filing false reports. The notice spelled it out in plain English. Any future incidents would result in criminal charges, fines up to $5,000, and possible jail time. Then came the knockout punch from her own employer. Karen worked as an office manager at a local real estate firm, and word travels fast in small communities. By the time the story spread through the neighborhood grapevine, clients were calling her boss directly, expressing concern about that HOA lady harassing homeowners. Reputation matters in real estate. Tom told me later that her boss called her in for a serious discussion. She was given an ultimatum: either stop the harassment completely or clean out her desk. Between losing her presidency, facing potential charges, and almost losing her job, reality finally broke through her bubble of entitlement. Karen hired her own lawyer, who promptly advised her to cease all contact with me and with anyone else she'd been harassing outside HOA boundaries. The next day, I decided to mark the occasion. Right beside my mailbox, I installed a small post with a laminated copy of the official boundary map. Above it, in friendly green letters that matched my shutters, the sign read, "Not your HOA. Not your problem. Petty? Absolutely. But after months of nonsense, I'd earned it." The neighborhood loved it. Within a week, other homeowners outside HOA jurisdiction started putting up similar signs. One clever neighbor down the street made theirs look like a historical marker, established 1952, still independent. Another planted an even larger vegetable garden than mine, complete with a sign reading, "HOA Free Zone. Tomatoes Welcome." It became a quiet rebellion, a declaration of independence from Karen's brand of suburban tyranny. Within a month, 3 more board members resigned, citing the toxic environment Karen had created. The HOA, once notorious for its suffocating rules, became noticeably more reasonable overnight. Janet was elected as the new president. She issued an official apology to everyone who'd been wrongfully hassled and made it a priority to clearly define the actual HOA boundaries. At the next meeting, she even stopped by to compliment me personally. "I have to say, Dan," she smiled, "the green shutters add real character to the neighborhood." As for Karen, she kept her job, barely, but lost every ounce of influence she once wielded. She still lives across the street, though now she keeps her eyes, and her clipboard, firmly on her own yard. Every once in a while, I catch her peeking through her blinds at my thriving garden, but she never says a word. The police know her name now, and not in a good way. The city keeps a record of her false reports. The HOA won't let her near board business again. And karma? Karma wasn't done. Turns out I wasn't her first target, just the first one who fought back with receipts. At the settlement hearing last week, the judge ordered Karen to pay $15,000 in damages. Tom said she burst into tears in court, sobbing that she was only trying to maintain property values. Maybe so. But in the end, the only property that lost value was hers.